Are there situations where you should keep like the old plan in place? Are there people that are going to be like better off just continuing how they were doing it before, or in other words, not making any changes, or is that even possible?
Right. So the old plan in place would be what they've been doing previously. And in general, kind of the leaning there would be if you weren't sure, you would go on the pay as you earn plan as an option or revise pay as you earn, depending on where you were at. And pay as you earn offered a payment cap and allowed you to file taxes separately, while repay had an interest subsidy. And
Hmm.
so those are the two main ones, right? And so, first of all, do you need to make a change right now? I think that's probably the first question to ask,
Yeah.
right? And that partly comes down to what's your payment scheduled to be now and what plan are you on now? As the payment pause ends, right? Payments are scheduled to kick back in at what they were pre-pandemic or pre-freeze, unless you certified income along the way. No one's been required to certify income in the last 3 years, but if you have, for whatever reason, payments would resume based on that update instead of what they were pre-pandemic. But what that means is you may have a $0 payment that is scheduled to last for another year or possibly more, depending on what recertification dates you have on your file.
Or a low payment.
Or a low payment. Yeah, I mean, I would certainly take a $25 payment or a $150 payment over what an attendings payment might be if let's say you graduated residency in 2019 and, man, now you've gone through and 4 years into practice, 5 years into practice, that's a decent change in income, right? So,
Yep.
first take a look at that. And so the reason being, if you are going to make a change on a student loan plan, so if you're going to change to a different payment plan, if you happen to need to consolidate your loans, that's going to require a new income certification, which is going to reset your payment amount based on most recent income. So does that make
Yeah.
sense?
So you want to be careful with anything that triggers your income to be verified again, particularly if you're in a ultra low payment scenario, and
Right.
especially if you're going for PSLF, because with PSLF, we want to make payments as low as possible for as long as possible. So the takeaway is you need to be aware of what your current payment is and get an idea of how long that would continue if you did nothing. And there's probably going to be a lot of people that should do nothing because that payment is so low, because most people's income goes up. But there's going to be some of you that probably should do something before then. Like the longest you could do nothing would be your next income certification date, or the required date that you have to certify income. So there'll be a date that will come around that will be like, you have to show your income. So that's like, most delayed possible route of doing anything would be to do nothing until that date comes. What's the date that's going to be, Jeff? The earliest you said?
Yeah. So the earliest that anyone's required to certify income at this point is March 1st of 2024. So that's March 1st of next year at the time we're recording.
Mm.
Anything that happened that is scheduled to occur before that gets a full year extension. And so let's say you had your anniversary. The anniversary for student loans. How delightful. But that was in February of 2024 was your scheduled time to recertify. That gets pushed out all the way until 2025. So
Sheesh.
in that case, let's say you are the luckiest of the lucky as far as timing goes on your student loan certification. You could have still a $0 payment or a low payment that lasts from now for another year and a half.
Mm.
And that's why you may want to just double check that.
Yeah.
Let me give you real quick. You can find that if you ever were to go to studentaid.gov, there's a file there called My Aid Data. And if you were to just search for the term IDR anniversary within that file, it will give you that date. That date, if it's anytime earlier than March 1st, 2024, push it out to whatever that same date is
Mm-hmm.
in the year following 2024. And that gives you an
Right.
idea.
So a lot of people maybe just are going to delay that, or, let that thing play out as long as they possibly can. Now, there's a lot of exceptions to that, like consolidation is the one, or maybe your income's gone down since that's probably less likely. But consolidation is probably the big one where there's some of these new benefits out there where it's in your best interest to consolidate, even though maybe the payment's going to go up some. It starts to get complicated on how to figure that out. But maybe we could talk through some of those examples where maybe a consolidation makes sense, even though it might affect your income payment.
Yeah, so cases where a consolidation might make sense. And right now we'll talk about it time oriented, time urgent type stuff right now, because we
Yeah.
are in a time period where if you consolidate by the end of this year, there are a whole lot of benefits to that compared to the way consolidations used to work and also the way that credit will be granted to them going forward. And so consolidating may make sense if you have a few different options here. One would be maybe you've got really old loans and they're on the old FFEL loan program. You might know that. One telltale sign would be if you had a private FFEL loan and the payments weren't paused during the pandemic. That's one way you know you've got an old loan. What are we going to say, Daniel?
How do you know if you have an FFEL loan?
So a lot of the times when you go to the servicer, it's going to show up somewhere in the title of that loan. But the surest way to find out what kinds of loans you have are to go to that same file on studentaid.gov, and you can actually find out what the title, what the description of that loan is. And if it's FFEL, it says that right in the description. So actually just search for FFEL
In that
in
same
the file.
document.
Yes. And if it says that it's not been paid in full or consolidated already, then you probably have an old FFEL loan. The reason that's a problem is that only direct loans qualify for, and so direct loans are a classification or specific type of loan that the federal program puts out there, but only the direct loans qualify for PSLF. FFEL loans can qualify, but first they have to be consolidated into a direct loan. And so if you've got those old loans, to make them qualify, you'll have to do a consolidation
before the end of the year.
You could do that. Yeah, before the end of the year would be best, because we're in a time period right now where any previous credit that you would have had on those loans gets consolidated as well. So
right. So that basically, the consolidation is a potential strategy to get otherwise not qualified payments to qualify.
Right. So to get loans that wouldn't have qualified to qualify is one way. The other one is if you have loans, and this may go hand in hand with having some FFEL, some old loans and some new loans, is loans that have different payment histories on them. So a common, maybe not common, but a case I've seen multiple times in the last couple of weeks even is someone that had some undergrad loans. They worked for a year or two full time, and then they went to med school, so they weren't working during that portion of the time, but they got new loans naturally. That seems to go hand in hand, med school loans, right? And then those med school loans start getting credit 4 years later when they hit residency. But if you combine those two together, you get those 2 years or year of full-time employment. A lot of times it seems like they're university-based employment then too, before you go stereotype maybe here, but that's what we're seeing with some of those. And so now I get 2 more years from my undergrad loans credited towards my gigantic loans from med school. And that would be a reason to consolidate too.
Yeah, that can be a home run. Now, and sometimes even if, say you got that, say you're not going to have to certify income until maybe February of 2025 at the longest. So, and let's say your payment's really low. There's plenty of situations I can think of where even if you're in that scenario where payments are low and they're going to continue to be low until way down the road, like February of 25, that you still might want to consolidate and voluntarily cause your payments to go quite a bit up, because the benefit of that adding PSLF payments is substantial enough. So that's what you're weighing there, is like the cost of increased payments over the next however many months versus the benefit of sooner forgiveness, or basically sooner forgiveness.
Yeah. So give that kind of an example. If you've got a $5,000 FFEL loan hanging out there, and certifying income now is going to make your payment $2,000 a month higher, that's not the case for a consolidation. But if you have a larger old balance that could benefit from forgiveness, or it could bring 2 years worth of credit to a giant balance from med school, then that's certainly worth looking into.
Yeah, and then there's a few other strategies I've heard you talk about that tie into that consolidation strategy we hadn't hit on yet today, but it pulls in all your loans, right? Like not only, so we've been talking about the borrower's loans, but the borrower could also be the parent.
Oh yeah. So that's
This is
been
where
it.
it gets crazy in my head. I mean, student loans have been crazy for a while, but this is just yet another new crazy strategy that's come about.
Yeah, and this is really probably a time limited option, but going along with that IDR one time account adjustment that if you consolidate loans by the end of the year, they all get the same credit and applied to it no matter what the payment plans were. What we're seeing there is there's the lesser known forgiveness option of 20 or 25 years. So payments, it doesn't matter where you're employed at that point. It's just 20 or 25 years of payments. Those loans get forgiven as well, but we have some that have been paying on loans since like 1999, their own loans, and now they have kids that have just finished college, and so they have parent plus loans. And if you consolidate those loans together, your old loans with the parent plus loans, those can get the credit as well. And so limited use case, but holy moly, what a benefit for those it
But
applies to.
not that limited.
That's true.
I mean, there's got to be a lot of people that have children that are, especially get big student loans. Where we're seeing it is where you had some old federal loans that were just like super low interest rate, and maybe you had the money to pay it off, but you're like, it's 2% interest rate. So people were just paying the minimum payment on their 2% interest rate student loans, even though they could have paid it off, and they've kind of drug it out for a while. So they still have it, but now they even fast forward to having kids, and then maybe they're starting to go to college, and that's a potential viable strategy. It's a very, very good strategy.